The stale air in my tiny Charlotte apartment always felt like a damp, gray blanket pulled over my face. Another Tuesday bled into another Wednesday, marked by the rhythmic hum of the ancient refrigerator and the distant sirens outside. My name is Sylvie Morrow, and I was 38 years old, jaded, absolutely, resourceful. Necessity had carved that into my bones. Discreet, a survival trait learned in the most brutal way. For years, my life had been painted in vibrant, shimmering hues, the kind you see in glossy brochures. I was a rising star, a leader, a woman building an empire with my own hands. Or so I believed. My world revolved around B, a woman whose charisma could charm the birds from the trees and the money from your pocket. I was high up in her downline in that ubiquitous makeup, multi-level marketing company, the one promising pink cars and financial freedom. I didn't just sell lipstick, I sold the dream, and I lived it, or what I thought was it. I built a team, mentored women, and poured every spare dime and every ounce of my energy into the business. I believed in B. I saw her on stage, elegant and powerful, talking about empowerment and sisterhood. I saw the accolades, the dazzling smiles, the tears she could conjure on command as she spoke of overcoming hardship. I was drawn into her orbit, blinded by the light she seemed to emanate. She became my mentor, my confidant, almost a friend. She knew my goals, my fears, my financial situation, down to the last penny. I invested back into inventory and training materials. She praised my hard work, my dedication. She made me feel seen, valuable, part of something bigger than myself. I worked 18-hour days sometimes, balancing my regular job with calls, meetings, presentations, and motivating my own team. I was exhausted, yes, but I was also high on the promise of success. B always said, "Keep investing in yourself, Sylvie. The rewards are just around the corner. You're almost there." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I saw the lifestyle she lived, the fancy house, the designer clothes, the effortless way she commanded attention in any room. She was the proof that the dream was real. My apartment back then wasn't this sad little box. It was spacious, filled with furniture I had saved for, walls painted in hopeful, cheerful colors. My closet wasn't just a few hangers of practical, worn clothes. It was bursting with the bright, professional attire B encouraged, the kind that screamed success, even if your bank account whispered struggle. I remember the meetings, the conferences in glittering ballrooms. We'd cheer, we'd cry, we'd hug strangers who instantly felt like family because we were all on this journey together. Led by the incomparable B, she was our queen, our inspiration. Looking back now, the taste of that Kool-Aid is acrid in my memory. The descent wasn't a sudden plunge. It was a slow, insidious erosion. First, the promises of guaranteed income started to feel conditional. Always a new goalpost, a new product to push, a new level to reach that required more investment. My savings dwindled, replaced by boxes of product, gathering dust, and motivational materials. I no longer had the energy to read. Then came the pressure. B's calls weren't just encouraging, they became demanding. Why wasn't I selling more? Why wasn't my team recruiting faster? Doubt, a tiny, unwanted seed, began to sprout in the fertile ground of my exhaustion and financial strain. But I pushed it down. B was never wrong. It had to be my fault. I wasn't working hard enough. I wasn't believing enough. The real turning point, the moment the shimmering facade cracked for good, was brutal. There was a major company event, a lavish retreat at a resort a few hours from Charlotte. We were all encouraged, practically required, to attend. B had pushed us hard to hit certain sales targets to qualify for special recognition. I had busted my tail, poured the last of my emergency fund into a bulk order to meet my quota, sacrificing things like car repairs and new tires. I arrived at the resort feeling a desperate mix of hope and anxiety. B had promised this retreat would be transformative, a reward for our dedication. Instead, it was where she cut the dead weight. During a private coaching session that felt more like an interrogation, B dismantled me piece by piece. She told me my efforts were lackluster. My team was underperforming because I lacked leadership, and that my negativity was a cancer to the organization. She spoke with a chilling lack of empathy, her eyes cold and sharp, a stark contrast to the warm, supportive gaze she used on stage. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were like ice shards. "Honestly, Sylvie," she'd said, leaning back in her plush chair, a faint smile playing on her lips, "some people just aren't cut out for this level of success. Maybe you should reconsider if you have what it takes." She then informed me that because I hadn't met some hidden metric she hadn't previously mentioned, I wouldn't receive the promised bonus or recognition. The bulk order I'd made, non-refundable, my investment, gone. I walked out of that room numb, not sad, not angry yet, just empty. The resort grounds, minutes before appearing like paradise, now felt like a gilded cage. The other women, laughing and networking by the pool, seemed like characters in a play I had suddenly been cast out of. I drove home that night on worn tires, the dashboard lights the only witnesses to the quiet unraveling inside me. That's when the true nature of her scheme, the depth of her manipulation, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't about empowering women. It was about extracting resources, money, time, loyalty, until you had nothing left to give. Then you were discarded. I wasn't a rising star. I was fuel for B's rocket. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The aftermath was a blur of trying to recoup my losses, realizing the mountain of debt I was under, and facing the humiliation of having to explain to friends and family why I'd fallen for it. Some were kind, others judgmental. My reputation in Charlotte's professional circles was damaged, tied to a venture many viewed with suspicion. Finding a decent job was tough. The jadedness settled in like a permanent resident, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. My resourcefulness was now aimed at survival, not success. My discretion was a reflex, avoiding questions about the business. Or B, I became invisible. Then, one evening, months later, scrolling through local news feeds, a small article caught my eye. It mentioned a police investigation into a suspicious death from several years prior, and a name jumped out at me. A name connected to B from before my time in the company. It triggered a faint memory, whispers I dismissed as jealous gossip back when I was still a true believer. Whispers about a boyfriend, an accident, a gun. My blood ran cold. Could it be? Had the woman who so effortlessly manipulated futures also ended a life? The seed of doubt B had planted about my own capabilities blossomed into a poisonous vine of suspicion about her entire existence. The injustice I felt over my financial ruin suddenly felt trivial compared to the potential horror she might be capable of hiding. The inciting incident wasn't just my ruin. It was the dawning horror that this woman, who destroyed lives financially and psychologically with impunity, might have also gotten away with literal murder and was still out there, charming and preying on the next wave of hopefuls. I knew her secrets, her methods, her weaknesses from the inside. I was the disillusioned insider, nursing not just financial wounds, but a festering moral outrage. And the thought, dark and unwelcome, began to take root. Someone had to stop her, Act 2. Struggle, the desperation and descent into darkness. My initial response to the dawning horror wasn't planning revenge. It was a desperate need to warn people. I couldn't sit by, knowing what I knew, suspecting what I suspected, while B continued to build her empire on the backs of women like me, maybe worse. My jadedness warred with a flicker of the idealism I once had, a belief that if people just knew the truth, they would turn away. My first attempts were clumsy, fueled more by righteous anger than by the cold, calculated approach I would later adopt. I tried reaching out to women still in B's downline, former colleagues I'd mentored. I sent carefully worded emails, hinting at the dangers, suggesting they look closely at their balance sheets, urging them to research the company's high turnover rates. The responses, or lack thereof, were crushing. Some emails bounced. Others were met with polite, bewildered replies, assuring me they were thriving and that B was a saint. A few were openly hostile, accusing me of being bitter, jealous, a negative influence, trying to sabotage their success. They used the same language B used, the language of cultish loyalty and dismissal of dissent. It was like talking to a wall of programmed positivity. They couldn't see the bars of the cage they were in. I remembered the whisper network, the rumors that circulated sotto voce at events, the nervous jokes about B's temper or her intensity. I tried tapping into that. I contacted a woman who had been in B's inner circle even longer than me, someone who had left the company abruptly years ago. I hoped she might share my disillusionment, perhaps even have heard the same chilling rumors about the murder. Her name was Clara, and she had seemed kind, albeit fiercely loyal to B back then. I found her on social media, living a quiet life in a different state. I messaged her carefully at first, talking about the old days, testing the waters. When I finally brought up B, Clara's response was immediate and icy. "That woman is poison," she wrote back. "Stay away from her, Sylvie, and don't ever contact me again. I've moved on." She blocked me before I could even ask about the whispers. It was a dead end, and a painful reminder of how deeply people wanted to bury their association with B next. I considered the company itself. Surely, a corporation, even an MLM, wouldn't tolerate a top earner with a history like the one I suspected, maybe even confirmed through the local news article I kept revisiting. I tried finding a contact in their compliance or ethics department. The company website offered only generic customer service numbers and online forms that seemed designed to deflect, not address, serious concerns. I spent hours drafting a formal complaint, detailing my financial losses, the manipulative tactics, and hinting darkly at serious legal and ethical concerns regarding a high-ranking distributor. I attached what evidence I had screenshots of B's income claims next to my own dwindling bank statements, copies of inventory orders I couldn't return. I sent it off, feeling a faint tremor of hope. That hope was extinguished a week later by a boilerplate email stating my submission had been reviewed and no actionable violations were found. It included a paragraph about distributor independence and how the company could not be responsible for individual business practices or financial outcomes. It was a masterclass in corporate deflection, legally sound and utterly dismissive of the human cost. My jadedness deepened. The system was rigged to protect its stars, not the casualties. My resourcefulness felt futile against a fortress of legal disclaimers and a culture of willful blindness. Meanwhile, my own life remained a precarious balancing act. The minimum wage job I'd finally found barely covered rent and cheap groceries. Every unexpected expense, a bus fare increase, a minor medical bill, felt like a crisis. The boxes of unsold makeup sat in the corner of my living room, a constant physical reminder of my failure and B's betrayal. Selling them off online yielded pennies on the dollar, each transaction a little chip at my already eroded self-worth. I ate a lot of ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. My social life was non-existent. I couldn't afford to go out, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to pretend things were okay. I became even more discreet, avoiding conversations about my past, living on the fringes of life in Charlotte. Then came the public humiliation. It wasn't direct contact from B, which would have been easier to face. It was subtler, more insidious, a testament to her mastery of psychological warfare. I started noticing things online. Old photos of me at company events, posted by people who were still in the downline, but with comments subtly edited or added later. A photo of me confidently leading a team meeting had a new caption. Remember when we thought anyone could make it? So glad I stayed dedicated. Another picture of me smiling next to B had been cropped to remove me entirely, reposted with a caption about loyalty and weeding out negativity. It was digital gaslighting, rewriting history to paint me as a failure, a cautionary tale. And then there were the anonymous comments on articles about MLM failures or local business news, comments that echoed B's dismissive words, mentioning bitter former distributors who blamed others for their own lack of effort. The language was too specific, too familiar. It was B, or someone acting on her behalf, ensuring that even outside her direct sphere, My name was synonymous with failure and negativity. It felt like she was still reaching into my life, twisting the knife. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. My internal monologue became a relentless loop of anger, regret, and despair. How could I have been so blind? How could she be so cruel? I'd replay conversations, scrutinize B's past actions, searching for the signs I'd missed, the red flags I'd ignored in my eagerness to believe. The jadedness curdled into a deep, abiding bitterness. Resourcefulness felt like a cruel joke when all your resources had been systematically stripped away. Discretion was a necessity, keeping my head down to avoid further pain. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by dreams of glittering stages and B's cold eyes. The rumors about the murder incident resurfaced in my mind with increasing frequency. I started digging cautiously online. It wasn't difficult to find old local news archives if you knew where to look. Details were sparse in the public record, but enough was there to confirm the basics. A boyfriend, a shooting, a self-defense claim, an acquittal that raised eyebrows even then. Reading the dry facts, knowing what I knew about B's capacity for manipulation, sent shivers down my spine. The puzzle pieces fit together in a terrifying way. Her ability to control narratives, to charm and deceive, wasn't just limited to selling makeup. It extended to convincing a court of law she was innocent of murder. It added a layer of chilling confirmation to the danger she represented. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a predator operating in plain sight, shielded by a corporate structure and a carefully crafted public image. My attempts to warn others, to appeal to authority, had failed. B remained untouchable, thriving, leaving a trail of damaged lives behind her. My own life was a wreck, a monument to my misplaced trust and her ruthlessness. I was at rock bottom. I remember one particularly bleak evening. The power company had sent a final shut-off notice. There was barely any food in the apartment. The boxes of unsold product seemed to mock me. I sat in the dim light, the weight of it all crushing me. The financial ruin, the lost reputation, the chilling certainty that this woman, who had taken everything from me and potentially taken a life, was living her best life, preparing to ensnare more victims. Despair washed over me, thick and suffocating. For a moment, the thought of just giving up, of letting the gray blanket of my existence consume me, was tempting. But then, a different feeling emerged from the ashes of my despair. Cold, hard, focused. It wasn't the desperate anger of the beginning. It was something sharper, honed by loss and betrayal. It was the understanding that conventional methods were useless against B. She operated outside the bounds of normal decency, normal rules. To stop her, I had to think like her. I had to use my insider knowledge, my hard-won understanding of how her world worked, against her. My jadedness became a source of clarity, stripping away any remaining illusions. My resourcefulness saw opportunities where before I only saw obstacles. My discretion, born of a need to hide, became a tool for operating unseen. The rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the foundation for building something new, something dangerous. The disillusioned insider was ready to strike back. The thought of revenge wasn't just a flicker anymore. It was a burning, icy fire in my gut. Act 3. Revenge, the reckoning, its execution. And the aftermath rising from that low point wasn't a sudden leap. It was a slow, deliberate climb, fueled by a singular, unwavering purpose. The despair hadn't vanished entirely, but it was now a cold fuel, channeled into focus. My jadedness had hardened into a protective shell, numbing me to the smaller pains so I could focus on the larger target. My resourcefulness, sharpened by years of stretching pennies, was now applied to information gathering and strategic planning. My discretion, once a shield for my shame, became the cloak for my intentions. I was no longer just Sylvie, the victim. I was Sylvie, the architect of B's downfall. The first step was reconnaissance. I needed to know everything B was doing now. Social media was a goldmine. B lived her life online, carefully curated, of course, but revealing nonetheless. I created a burner account, scrubbed clean of any connection to my real identity. I followed her top team members, the company's official pages. I observed her events, her pronouncements, her interactions. She was as magnetic and manipulative as ever, still luring in new recruits with the same impossible promises. Her wealth seemed to have grown, her lifestyle even more extravagant. It sickened me, but it also provided crucial details. I saw her travel schedule, the dates and locations of major rallies and training sessions, the names of her most loyal lieutenants. I also delved deeper into the company's structure, leveraging the intimate knowledge I had from my time inside. I remembered the corporate hierarchy, the key players, the internal language, the compliance loopholes. I knew how they handled complaints by ignoring them, how they protected their top earners fiercely, and what their ultimate vulnerability was: their carefully constructed image of empowerment and integrity. My revenge couldn't be a direct accusation. That would be too easily dismissed, just like my earlier attempts. It had to be subtle, undeniable, and hit her where it hurt most: her reputation and her income stream, the very pillars of her power. The murder detail remained a crucial, albeit complex, piece. I knew I couldn't use it directly. I had no proof beyond old news articles and rumors, and going to the police myself felt risky, potentially dragging my own damaged past into the spotlight. But the knowledge of it, the chilling understanding of her capacity for ruthlessness, informed my strategy. It wasn't just about exposing a scammer. It was about stopping a dangerous individual. This wasn't just revenge for me. It was, in a twisted way, a form of justice for all her victims, known and unknown. My plan began to take shape, a complex tapestry woven from B's own methods and the company's weaknesses. It required patience, timing, and an almost obsessive attention to detail, all traits honed by my years in her system and my current need for discretion. I needed to turn her greatest strengths, her public image, her control over her narrative, her reliance on her downline's blind loyalty, against her. I identified a major upcoming event, an annual national conference in a city hundreds of miles away. This was B's prime territory, her chance to shine on stage, to recruit and motivate thousands. It was also where she was most visible, most exposed. This would be the stage for her reckoning. My resourcefulness kicked in. I didn't have money for flights or fancy hotels, but I had ingenuity. I found a way to travel cheaply, taking a series of long-haul buses, uncomfortable but effective. I booked the cheapest, dingiest motel room I could find near the convention center, paying cash to leave no trace. My days in Charlotte were spent preparing, my nights planning. I crafted multiple online profiles, personas that seemed like disgruntled former customers or low-level distributors, accounts that had been dormant for years, but suddenly came to life with vague questions and subtle criticisms about unrealistic expectations and hidden costs. I started conversations in obscure online forums dedicated to discussing MLM experiences, planting seeds of doubt, asking questions that mirrored the ones I'd ignored when I was inside. The core of my plan involved exploiting a specific, little-known vulnerability in the company's internal system, one I remembered from my days of handling team finances and reports. It wasn't a security flaw in the hacking sense, but a procedural loophole, a way to introduce verifiable, albeit context-free, information into the system that would be difficult for B to immediately discredit without exposing more of her methods. It required precise timing and access to a specific type of terminal, usually only found in designated training rooms at major events. Getting access wouldn't be easy. My face was known, at least to B and her closest people. Discretion was paramount. I arrived in the conference city 2 days before the event, keeping to the shadows. I spent time near the convention center, observing the flow of people, the security measures, the location of the training rooms. I noticed they often left doors propped open during setup or between sessions for cleaning crews. On the day of B's big presentation, the energy in the convention center was buzzing. Women streamed in, dressed in their finest business attire, faces alight with hope. It twisted something inside me, seeing them, knowing what awaited so many of them. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It felt like a grim necessity. My moment came during a transition between sessions, a brief window when a training room door was left ajar, and a cleaning cart was conveniently parked nearby. Wearing nondescript clothes and a baseball cap pulled low, carrying a generic laptop bag, I slipped inside. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Jadedness had killed the fear. Only the objective remained. Inside the room, the terminal glowed. I worked quickly, accessing the specific internal portal I needed. Using the carefully crafted data points I'd prepared, aggregated, anonymized statistics, showing the massive financial losses incurred by distributors in certain high-performing downlines, like B's, cross-referenced with inventory purchase data and bonus payout structures. I uploaded the information. It wasn't a direct accusation, but a data dump, presenting undeniable numbers that exposed the predatory churn and burn model. The system would process it, integrate it into the internal reporting, making it accessible to anyone with high-level clearance looking into the underlying metrics of the company's performance, not just the glossy top-line numbers be presented. It was like planting a financial time bomb in her empire. But data alone wasn't enough to truly dismantle her power lay in her narrative, her ability to control perceptions. I needed to introduce chaos, doubt, and leverage the darker rumors about her past without directly implicating myself. Using my burner accounts and a secure connection, I began phase 2. I posted cryptic messages in the online forums I'd infiltrated, threads discussing the difficulty of making money. I spoke of insider information, suggesting that the top earners weren't just successful through hard work, but through ruthless methods and a willingness to step on anyone. I hinted that their glamorous lives hid dark secrets, and that some people get away with anything, even things the law should have stopped. I didn't name B directly, but I used details that those who knew the whispers would recognize, references to her past, her sudden move, the unexpected passing of someone close to her years ago. It was vague enough to avoid libel, but specific enough to plant seeds of unease and curiosity. I knew how fast rumors spread in that world, especially when they tapped into existing doubts. While the data bomb was ticking within the corporate system, designed to raise questions among management and auditors, the online whispers were the psychological warfare, targeting the downline, B's base of power. My goal was to create a pincer movement, pressure from above and rot from below. I also knew B had an almost pathological need for validation and control, especially during her public appearances. I made sure my most pointed, albeit anonymous, online comments were posted shortly before her scheduled presentation. I imagined her backstage, perhaps glancing at social media and seeing the flicker of doubt, the hint of suspicion, the veiled references to her past secrets. It wouldn't derail her entirely. She was too skilled a performer, but I hoped it would introduce a sliver of anxiety, a crack in her polished facade. Her presentation was live-streamed. I watched from my dingy motel room, a knot of tension in my stomach. She was magnificent, all confidence and charm, working the crowd, hitting every emotional beat. But I saw it. A micro-expression when the live chat briefly flickered across the screen before being disabled. A split-second hesitation when she spoke about integrity and overcoming challenges. A forced brightness in her eyes that didn't quite reach her mouth. It was imperceptible to most, but I knew her tells. I knew the cracks in the mask. The seeds of doubt were being sown. The aftermath of the conference wasn't immediate public collapse, not a dramatic movie scene of her being dragged off stage. Reality is messier, slower. My revenge was designed to be a process of unraveling, not an explosion. In the weeks and months that followed, I watched from my discreet distance. The data I'd planted internally began to circulate in corporate reports. Questions were quietly raised about the unsustainable loss rates in certain high-volume downlines. Audits were initiated. B, for all her charm, was terrible with actual numbers and compliance details. She had always relied on others to handle that. The financial time bomb was starting to detonate, not with a bang, but with a series of inconvenient questions and investigations from corporate. Simultaneously, the rumors I'd amplified online began to spread. Disgruntled distributors, already struggling, found validation in the vague accusations of ruthless tactics. The whispers about B's past, the hints of something darker than just financial manipulation, created an undercurrent of unease. I saw posts questioning her, comments asking about the rumors, a slow erosion of the blind trust she had cultivated. It wasn't mass defection yet, but the foundation of her authority was weakening. B reacted predictably. She increased the pressure on her team, demanding more loyalty, more sales, lashing out at perceived negativity, just as she had done with me. Her public persona became slightly more strained, the cracks more visible to those who were looking. She tried to squash the rumors online, but the decentralized nature of forums and private groups made it impossible. Every denial sounded a little too shrill, a little too defensive. My financial situation remained precarious, but the weight on my chest had lessened. The jadedness was still there, but it was now mixed with a grim satisfaction. I had taken everything from B that she had taken from me, not money directly, but the source of her wealth and power, her untouchable reputation, and the unquestioning loyalty of her followers. I hadn't exposed the murder in a court of law, but I had reintroduced the chilling possibility of her dark past into the narrative that defined her. I had poisoned her well. The ultimate consequence for B wasn't a jail sentence, though I hoped one day she'd face justice for everything. It was a slow, public dismantling. The corporate audits uncovered financial irregularities and non-compliant practices within her team, things she had overseen or encouraged. The pressure from corporate, combined with the growing distrust and defection within her downline, fueled by the rumors, created a toxic environment she couldn't control. Her income plummeted as her team shrank. Her public appearances became less frequent, her online presence less triumphant, more damage control. The pink car, that symbol of her success, was eventually repossessed. A quiet humiliation that spoke louder than any public accusation. Her empire didn't collapse overnight, but it withered under the combined assault of financial scrutiny and reputational damage, orchestrated by the insider she had discarded. For me, there was no grand victory parade. Revenge didn't magically restore my savings or my lost years. I was still Sylvie Morrow in Charlotte, 38, jaded, resourceful, discreet. But the bitterness had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of closure. I had faced the woman who had ruined me, used my knowledge of her world against her, and ensured she could no longer prey on others in the same way. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was justice, my kind of justice, delivered from the shadows. The path ahead was still uncertain, still required resourcefulness and discretion, but it was my path now, not one dictated by B's manipulative schemes. The final, surprising twist was this. Achieving revenge hadn't brought me perfect peace, but it had given me back my agency. I was no longer defined by what she had taken, but by what I had done. I had survived, I had fought back, and I had won, on my own terms. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.